Doctors of Reddit, have you ever experienced an in-flight emergency as a passenger? What happened? This happened to me. It was a red-eye flight. I spent the first few hours in the daze of an almost sleep that wouldn't quite take hold. The last time I looked at my watch I could guess we were still over water, or possibly past the sea, and halfway through the Sahara Desert. The call came overhead for a doctor or person with medical expertise on the plane. It told us to press the call button, but there were 3 attendants talking to a man in the galley ahead of me on the right. It was clear where the sick passenger was. I was literally months out of medical school, but this bizarre sounding hypothetical came up in conversation a few years ago, and ever since then I knew there wasn't any doubt on the right thing to do next. I unbuckled my belt, rubbed my eyes and stood up. Meanwhile, literally 4 other older passengers were confidently striding down the aisles from different sides of the plane toward the galley. We were on a flight from London to Nairobi, making conversation before boarding. I found out a sizable portion of the weekday flight was involved in health and development aid headed to different countries in East Africa, or relatively wealthy professionals going on safari. Suffice to say, there were a few doctors in the house. I stopped a stewardess a few seconds later to ask if she thought they needed an extra hand from a pediatrician in training to give medications, start and forth or provide CPR. She said they were probably fine. I went back to sleep. BTW. I never tell this story because it's super boring told in person, and b, I've heard at least one and heard of several other doctors telling a story of being on a plane when someone called for a doctor and several surgeons coming back from some research conference all come up together. I wonder if this just happens a lot. Docs are secretly drawn to the same flights, or if some of these stories are BS. I'm a fireman and went over when they called for a doctor/nurse on a ferry once. A woman had stubbed her toe, had ripped the nail off, and was bleeding everywhere. The only other reasonably qualified person who came over was an American nurse, but she was seasick and not really much help. Anyway, I cleaned it up, bandaged it, gave her some painkillers, and told her to seek medical help if she had any more issues once we got to land. Wandered back to my newspaper and cup of tea. I asked a cardiothoracics registrar about this once. She was on a flight and heard the announcement, but ignored it hoping someone else would respond. When they asked again she put her hand up, thinking it might be something serious. It was a kid with a sore ear. I was on a plane to a conference with about a dozen other emergency physicians. A passenger got dizzy. It was benign. When they called overhead for a doctor, everyone looked at each other, and thus began the fastest game of 1, 2, 3 not it I have ever seen. Nurse here. I have a lot of anxiety around flying, so I had hit up the airport bar and had taken anxiety medicine. We were still on the runway. I'm just trying to keep calm when I heard, "Is there a doctor or a nurse?" My husband jumps up and says, "Here's a nurse." I panicked and then just focused on the situation. So there I'm watching a woman have a grand mal seizure. Gave her O2, kept her safe, and had a passenger go through her purse so I could use her name, and asked her to look at any bottles to see what meds she's on to figure out what was going on. Anyhow, a neurologist happened to be there too. We helped get her into a wheelchair and they got her some help. Hope she was okay. My mom, also a nurse, has the better story of being in flight when a gentleman that had a heart attack. She got free tickets from the airline for helping the flight attendants while they landed the plane. 2x the first time I was the only person that responded. I looked around the plane and couldn't figure out what was going on because there didn't seem to be a commotion anywhere. The attendants guided me to the back of the plane where there was a woman asking for a Tylenol for a headache. I asked her a few questions, then the flight attendants showed me where the emergency medical supplies were. They wouldn't touch them. I took down the bag and had to hunt through it until I found the meds. Afterwards they had me sign paperwork. They had me get on their phone and talk to someone from the airline, tell them what happened, and give them my info including my medical license number. It seemed a bit blown out of proportion. Second time, the passenger passed out in the back of the plane. Once he woke up, the flight attendants helped him to the front of the plane and laid him down. They put a call out for medical personnel and about 6 people came forward. I was towards the back, so by the time I got there he had plenty of help. They told me to go back to my seat, but after a while it looked like they were struggling, so I flagged down the flight attendant, told her that I was available if they needed help. They ended up needing help within fourth, so I went up and placed it. Passenger got some fluid and was doing much better before by the time we landed. My friend, a nurse, responded on a flight going to / coming from Denver. Guy was pale, diaphoretic and complaining of chest pain. Flight attendant told her the captain wanted to know if they should land. She said yes and proceeded to start in fourth while staying with the gentleman. They landed in Salt Lake City and indeed the guy was having a heart attack. I'm not a doctor, but I was an EMT for nearly a year before joining the military. On my flight to Fort Hood after basic, a young man, mid-20s, around my age, started having trouble breathing. He told the flight attendants and they came over the intercom asking for anyone with medical knowledge / experience. I didn't see anyone else stand up, so I bit the bullet, so to say, and helped him out. I asked if he had any known allergies. He says yes, peanuts. I asked for the wrappers of what he had ate. He had bought a Nutri-Grain type bar in the airport and didn't check it because it didn't explicitly state it had peanuts in it. He thought he was good to go. But, as I'm sure you figured out by now, the bar did in fact have peanuts in it and he was having a mild reaction to it. I know from past experiences that most planes have a bag of simple medical supplies, such as Benadryl, and asked for the bottle. I gave him a few, and the flight attendants asked his seat neighbor to swap seats with me so I could monitor him. He ended up being fine and bought me lunch and Starbucks. When we landed in Dallas, I had a layover. It probably helped that I was in uniform on the flight. Even if I had zero medical knowledge, they probably would have trusted me anyways. Not a doctor, but this happened to me. In 2011, I was flying from Miami to Barbados on my honeymoon. As we were most of the way there, a passenger about 15 rows in front of me started having a heart attack. I didn't know what was happening, but there was a lot of commotion. The pilot got on the intercom and announced that we were making an emergency landing in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and that we would be coming in fast. He wasn't joking about that last part. As we start coming down, I'm thinking, holy shit, is a plane supposed to descend this quickly? We landed. EMTs came on board and took the guy off. I don't know what happened to him. Shortly after that, we took off and flew on to Barbados. I was a passenger on a flight one time when a Korean man next to me started throwing up. There was a doctor on the flight who also determines he has a fever, headache, abdominal pain, and rashes on his lower back. The doctor's boss, who actually seemed more like a love interest, suggested he had meningococcal disease and that if this was the case it could spread to the other passengers quite rapidly. The doctor decides it's not meningococcal and convinces the flight crew not to turn around. Soon another passenger becomes ill with the same symptoms. The doctor assembles a makeshift diagnostic team with 3 passengers, which I thought was kind of weird. After a discussion with his team, the doctor is convinced that both passengers are sick with ciguatera poisoning because they both ate seafood. He announces to the rest of the passengers that anyone who ate seafood should go to the restroom and throw up. However, this cannot be right because the doctor's boss is showing similar symptoms, but she did not eat the seafood. Obviously there are no antibiotics on the plane, so the doctor collects what medicine he can find from the passengers on board. The doctor's love interest convinces him to do a lumbar puncture to find out whether the illness is meningitis. The test is a success, but it comes back negative. She gets upset beyond belief, which the doctor realizes is a sign of mass hysteria. He tests this theory by suggesting to the passengers that one symptom is uncontrollable trembling of the left hand, which many of them immediately start to exhibit. While all this is happening, the Korean man is still dying. The doctor thinks that maybe he has stuck cocaine up his ass to try and smuggle drugs into the country, which would be causing his symptoms. The doctors hold him down, at which point he finds out his pain is eased by pressure. Searching through the man's wallet, he finds a scuba license and a receipt for scuba gear rental, dated the previous day. The man is diagnosed with decompression sickness, caused by surfacing too quickly when diving, which was further worsened by boarding an airplane, which is pressurized to 8,000 feet above sea level. The doctor tells the flight crew to drop the plane below 5,000 feet and get the man oxygen, and he will be fine. This sounds like an episode of House It Is. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that bell to turn on notifications, so you'll be sure to know when the next video comes out. Want to watch some more? Check out my other videos. I really do appreciate everyone who helps make these videos possible. And as always, thanks for watching.